Well, at the polls today, you're not just voting on who you want to represent your state or represent your district, but also on measures that will impact your community and your wallet, such as minimum wage and marijuana laws. Joining us now to break it all down is Ryan Payne, president at Payne Capital Management, and Dan Geltrude. He's a business analyst and he's the founder of Geltrude and Company. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start with you, Ryan, and talk marijuana, because 4 states voting on marijuana laws that will legalize either recreational use or medical use. If marijuana advocates gain ground today, what does it look like for U.S. listed cannabis stocks that we've been following very closely on Cheddar over the last few months?
It hasn't been pretty. I mean, they're down, most of them down over 50%. I mean, I can see a dead cat bounce if you see more legalization, just because you're kind of tapped out on how much growth you can have in the Canadian market, and they're all Canadian companies. So any inkling that the U.S. is going to get close to legalization will probably be good in the short term, but they're just still so overvalued.
Close to federal legalization is what you mean, or widespread state legalization?
Yeah, and I think that widespread on a state level, but hopefully ends up being federal eventually. So that's what I think anywhere in that direction is good for those stocks.
Maybe not with Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, but
he's down on pot. We know
a different day.
Dan, how are you looking at these cannabis companies heading into the election today?
I don't think, by the way, just on that point related to whether there's going to be legalization on a federal level, I actually don't see that happening for a long time, and I think that does have an impact on the cannabis companies. And the reason I don't think it's anytime soon is this. They're already taxing those companies. They're because everybody has to file a tax return because they're operational and they have sales and they have profits. But there's something in the Internal Revenue Code under 280E where with these cannabis companies, because they're a drug that's not legal, they don't allow a lot of the deductions that a company normally would have. Therefore, it increases the bottom line, and they're taxing it at a much higher rate than a regular company. So now they're getting the tax dollars, and you don't have to have politicians using political capital to try to get this thing passed federally. That's my view of what I see.
You're bumming me out, Dan.
Yeah, well, but listen, I do think you're going to see widespread passage at the state level because they are taxing it with a specific tax. And hey, new taxes, governments like that.
Yeah.
Well, guys, let's talk minimum wage, too, because minimum wage on the ballot in several states. And since 1996, no state has voted down a minimum wage increase. Ryan, I want to start with you. These increases, if they do go through, how are they going to help small and large businesses across America or hurt small and large businesses across America? And I ask this with the caveat that we're in a low unemployment environment anyway, where a lot of companies are having to raise wages just to be able to do business.
Yeah, I think it's a good sign. And I think the fact that we're at 3.7% unemployment, there's so much pressure on wages. Like, I work with a lot of business owners, and they're just trying to find people. And let's face it, it's been anemic how much wage growth we've seen the last couple of years. So I think it's really good to see that happen. And I think that'll just speed up the process. People need to be making more money at the lower end. So I think it's all positive.
Let's pull up this graphic again in terms of the states that are voting on the minimum wage. Dan, in the backdrop of all this is Amazon's move, an announcement recently that it is going to up its minimum wage at its company to $15 an hour. Are there certain races that you're watching to see how they're going to impact this debate and how it could potentially impact the market?
Yeah, let's keep one thing in mind. Minimum wage is a tax on business. Let's be very clear. And Amazon is not just going to absorb that, by the way. They're not for social justice. They're for stock value, right? So what's going to happen here is they'll increase their wages and say, okay, we're going to $15 minimum wage, and they look like the good guys. That's getting passed along to consumers. In what form, I don't know. And let's keep this in mind. The biggest problem with increasing the minimum wage to that, let's say $15 an hour, where there's been a lot of discussion, is wage compression. So somebody's making $8 an hour, they go to 15. What do these companies do with employees that are already making 15? Do they go to 30? And that's where the small business really gets hurt. I take a little bit of a different position than Ryan. I understand the market is driving up wages and can do that. I don't agree with these minimum wage increases.
I mean, 3% finally we got on the employment report just last week in terms of the growth that we're seeing across overall wages.
So let employers compete. I don't think that we need to have a government minimum wage across the board. That's a significant
Ryan, weigh in
increase.
here.
Well, I mean, look, I don't think it really matters because I think wages are going up just to be competitive. So whether the government steps in or not, I think wages are going up. But what we have to remember is if wages go up, that means the consumer has more money to spend, which is better for the economy, which means companies will make more money. So all this stuff's going to kind of move in tandem, is my opinion.
Let's end it with this, guys. The Fed and raising interest rates and the impact that potentially an increase in minimum wage could have on inflation and could have on the Fed moving forward with raising interest rates. We only have about 30 seconds left.
Well, I think the Fed ultimately may be backing off on their promises to continue to increase the rate. And the reason I say that is we're probably headed towards split government. Probably. If we do, I think we could expect that not a lot is going to get done economically. I think we're going to see the market slow down a little bit. Sure. I think the Fed will back off.
Gridlock is good. I agree with you, and I think that rates going up is a positive, and it's a very modest move up in interest rates, which is also good for the economy. So it's good news as well.
Guys, great to have both of you on today. Thanks so much for taking the time on this election day. That's Ryan Payne. He's president of Payne Capital Management, and Dan Geltrude, business analyst and founder of Geltrude and Company, joining us live from the floor of the New York City.
All the important issues at the crux of this election.